Aloha no kako. Aloha to all of our attendees. Mahalo for joining us today. As we prepare to begin at 11:45, I wanted to briefly orient everyone, those participating today, of our opening protocol for today's event. We'll begin with an opening chant leading into today's agenda of the webinar, part of the On the Horizon series. Okay, with that being said, let us begin. Kahali ay kamanaway amoy tuhalang na halaw landi kalay manuwe kaninay tuwa hindi walo no itu mahalewa itu mohoki elay lunayu ya me oe lai lai na hele hele wa ta na no ya atua lono e wa ima abaya ulu ke aloha no ya kako pakahi apo. Aloha and welcome to the webinar, part of the On the Horizon series from the UH Office Alumni Relations. My name is Malu Dudwa. I am the Hawaii Papua Cultural Engagement Specialist for UH Hilo, and today I will be your moderator. I wanted to open up today's event with the chant Kauka Hali'a. In its most simplest form, this chant speaks about our laka, our forest, in her different forms. One of these forms we see within the chant, or the imagery created within this chant, is the water evapotranspiration process. And if you're not familiar with that, it's just how the forest or plant life collects water and then releases it back to the natural ecosystem. But through this process, it feeds back into the lower parts of the forest, as well as the community that the forest surrounds. Today, as we talk through our webinar, I wanted to utilize this mana'o and apply it to our UH Hilo campus as we move forward, breaking barriers and begin to strengthen community ties. We need to understand as UH Hilo, we are the forest for our broader community, and it is through our resources and programs we're able to feed back into the community who surrounds us. Today, we are speaking as that forest. We are looking for solutions to how we, the forest, can continue to serve and to contribute to the health and well-being of our Hilo community. This new University of Hawaii webinar series will showcase programmatic endeavors, campus goals, and opportunities for support at UH's 10 dynamic campuses. Today, our speaker will be Chancellor Bonnie Erin, who became Chancellor of UH Hilo in 2019, in July of 2019, after serving as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at California State University, Monterey Bay. And with over 30 years of experience in higher education, Chancellor Erin was really great at understanding how universities like ours play a critical role in building and serving our island community. Please join me today in welcoming Chancellor Bonnie Erin. Aloha no Chancellor.
Aloha. Thank you for the generous introduction.
Right on, no problem. So before we get into the knit and grit of our questions and discussions today, I wanted to ask if you don't mind sharing a little bit about yourself and what brought you here to Hilo.
Well, I come to Hawaii via California, as you said, but also Illinois, and lived most of my life in rural communities. And so when it came time to start working at universities, fate sort of took me to very rural places once again. And the thing I really like about that is we get to see every day the impact that the university can have on the community and on our local students. Sometimes when you're in a big metropolitan area, you kind of get lost in the crowd. But here that is certainly not the case. Everyone knows where UH Hilo is, and the challenge is opening the doors a little bit more and really welcoming people in. And so when the job became available and I was looking for a chance to move on with my own career, coming to Hawaii, which is a place I have been visiting since I was 10, just seemed like a really good opportunity. And the values of UH Hilo line up so well with my own about students first, making sure every student at the university has a really rich experience, and trying to partner across sectors, whether it's economic development, social programs, cultural, the environment. We play a role in all of those things, and the chance to come here and kind of help lift the university up and help lift up the community and the island was just really attractive, and I always try to go where I think I can make a difference. And as I told my colleagues when I was leaving Monterey and they didn't really want me to go, I said, I'm going where I can make a difference, and I'm going where I think I'm needed right now in my life. And so it was the right opportunity at the right moment. And of course, it's been a crazy year. We were not anticipating a pandemic. And so it makes it a little more challenging, but also allows us to kind of tap into our own kind of creative resources, our skills, and say, okay, here's another problem. How are we going to address it? And so that's what we're trying to do.
Oh yeah. We have a saying here in Hilo, "Ho'okahivale no la o kamalihini, kala'ae he ohana oi." You have only one day to be a visitor. The very next day, you're part of the village, you're part of the family. You're washing dishes with everybody, you're washing the clothes, you're running around with everybody's kids, you're making sure everybody is doing their kuleana. And within this 1 year of being here at UH Hilo Chancellor, you definitely have stepped into that role given or the unforeseen presidencies that we are facing.
Yeah, I feel
So,
like I've been washing a lot of dishes, I think, yeah.
yes, welcome. So since coming to UH Hilo in July 2019, like you mentioned, so much has happened, not just on our campus and island, but around the world. Do you have a broad vision of where you see UH Hilo going in the future or moving forward in the future?
Yeah, we were putting together these strategic planning groups, which we are calling strategic doing teams, these very small groups of campus and community folks to try to identify some projects for us. And we had a conversation last spring about, do we launch this or do we wait because of the pandemic? And, the vice chancellors and I and other people I talked to on the campus said, now more than ever, it's important to have a vision and to have a strategic plan. And so as we think about what's essential and what's important about UH Hilo, a few things come to mind. One is the fact that we serve this island, and particularly the Native Hawaiian community and the Pacific Islander community, both Pacific Islanders who are on this island and across the Pacific Rim. And that's a really core piece of our mission, is to serve and serve with these communities. And I think there's lots of opportunities to do that, certainly with Kahakaula, our College of Hawaiian Language. There's so many opportunities to partner around Hawaiian medium education. And then I had the opportunity just a couple of days ago to tour the farm, finally, to go out to Panaeva and look at the farm and look at all the things that our agricultural program are doing that are kind of embedded in community, in this space, but also in native ways, and how we share some of these back and forth, right? Another priority is education that is based in Aina. Aina-based, culturally based education. You think about our science programs and the fact that, we're better to study geology than on this island with an active volcano, right? We're better to study the oceans and marine science or aquaculture, except on this island where we're surrounded by that ocean. And then, you think about our tropical conservation, biology, environmental science. And so ways that we can really support those science programs, but also the way our cultural programs are embedded. I see both our student support areas, like where you are in Kipuka, as being essential to those connections. But also I see like our sociology department and our English department bringing in authors who happen to live here on the Big Island to enrich the education of those students. So thinking about that as a big piece of the future. But the common thread through a lot of these things is hands-on education, which is really hard during a pandemic. But that's what we're known here at Hilo for, is this way of giving students really practical applied learning experiences, whether that be through an internship. I think about the business school and all the internships they have, our PIPES program, internships in the sciences, healthcare, right? What are the fields that this university can provide to educate students where there are jobs and needs in this community? So I think of healthcare, I think of education, right? But giving students all of those hands-on experiences, and then how we transition that to the online environment has been really interesting, right? Because you're not necessarily getting your hands on the issue, but with that hands-on education comes what I refer to as our standard of care. That at UH Hilo, we really care about students and their well-being, the whole student. And that we can do in an online environment, making sure we're there for students when they're struggling, that we're there to celebrate their successes with them. And so that view of the future entails maintaining that standard of care, creating those hands-on opportunities, not just for the students who actively seek them out, but trying to figure out a way for every student at UH Hilo to have an experience like that. And then now, the challenge is also how we do a better job serving the whole island and providing more for adult learners. Got lots of people here who have some college, but they didn't finish their degree for any number of reasons. And so how can we step into that space? And the cool thing is that the pandemic, I think, has helped, because now we all know how to do stuff online that we didn't know before. And some of the faculty are coming back and saying, I was always resistant. I didn't think I could build a community in my class, but now I'm thinking maybe I can. And so maybe there's a way for an adult student in KAU to be able to work around family and employment obligations and still work on their degree here at UH Hilo. So that's kind of the path to the future, is a combination of those really good hands-on experiences and some strong online programs. Clearly I could be talking about this for a long time, but I know you've got other questions, so I've got to come back a little bit.
I think that's very important, our hands-on piece, and providing that opportunity for students to actually apply what they're being offered academically and create an experience or an opportunity to experience that outside of the classroom. But like you said, the challenge has been, how do we deliver that virtually in these times? So it is exciting news, and it is exciting to see this being more implemented in our classes. And hopefully when things calm down and we get to come back to campus, even more so that experience can be transferred to the rest of our student community when they return. Awesome. I was glimpsing through our registration questions, and I thought this one was kind of important to mention, moving into our next talking point. The registration question reads, I'm lucky to have experience both as a UH Hilo student, alumnus, and resident of the island. I think there is a perception that UH Hilo is a bit of a snow globe, that it might exist on its own away from the rest of the island. What are you doing to combat that idea?
Well, and I think events like this are a baby step in the right direction. It is a perception I've heard in many quarters. When I first arrived, I started reaching out to certain organizations in the community, but I still haven't met everybody. I haven't gotten everywhere. And when I go out in community, I'm hearing from people that they see our students sometimes. Our students are out there doing service projects or just living in this community. And then, but they're saying they don't see as many of the faculty and the staff. So one of the things that I'm really excited about is our Center for Community Engagement. Under the leadership of Julie Maurer, she is starting a program that's called the kind of Engaged Scholars, I believe, where her office is working with faculty on community-based projects so that we can be doing things with the community in all sectors. And so for a faculty member to choose something that's relevant to what they're doing in their class, that subject matter, which could be psychology, it could be environmental studies, could be any number of things, but working with a group of students and with a community organization to actually do something of value. And that has so many benefits. It benefits the community organization they're working with, obviously. It benefits the students because they're getting that hands-on learning. And it's a way of opening that door, right, between campus and community. And I think it's so important when we talk about these things. I have a very good friend who runs one of the largest service learning programs in the country. And when she talks about service learning, she says, you know, service learning is something that you do with your community. You don't do it to your community, right? So we don't want to just parachute in and do something on a weekend and then disappear again. I mean, volunteerism is really important and we do a lot of that, but it's also more about sitting down together. And one of my regrets about the pandemic is not having had enough opportunity to really do that, to sit in community with other people and can plan what that future looks like. Because the future of this campus and the future of this community are linked. And I use that word, inextricably linked. I mean, one can't thrive without the other. And so how do we do that? I think sitting down, one of the things I'm going to be doing is putting together a community advisory committee so that I can hear from diverse voices in the community. And so if anyone's interested, be sure to send me a note. And that will help me, I think. And then building some of these bridges for me personally, and then encouraging others also to connect as they can. It's going to take time though, and it's going to take intentional effort. This doesn't happen by accident. It's something we just need to keep working on.
Oh yeah. Before I move on to the next question, Chancellor, I know in our previous meetings we talked about breaking barriers so that we can begin strengthening our community ties. And you have touched upon that topic, mentioning the different plans and programs that we want to implement through UH Hilo. Just on my own curiosity, what kind of barriers do you see UH Hilo as a campus breaking to let our community in?
I think I wrote a column for the Tribune Herald several months ago, actually almost a year ago now. And I talked about the front porch. And so one of those barriers is just people feeling like they can't come onto campus. And this campus belongs to the community. It belongs to the state of Hawaii. It's not ours, it's everyone's. But people feel sometimes that they need an invitation. So I think we need to keep issuing those invitations until people feel comfortable just dropping by. You know, just like your own front porch, right? Your own lanai. After a while, people just feel free to come around back of the house and sit down and talk story, right? But at first, you kind of knock at the front door, you're kind of tentative, and we're still, after decades, we're still sort of with that relationship, I think. So, but there are a couple of windows that we do have wide open. And again, pandemic rules are different. We are closed right now to keep our students safe and to keep the community as safe as possible. But when we start opening again, one of those is the performing arts. So inviting people on campus, and they engage in a couple of different ways. One is just, coming in to see events, right? That's one way. But then I noticed when I went to see the Hawaiian Nutcracker last fall, that there were keiki from the community who were also on stage, right? So we had a combination of campus and community people working together on this performance. International nights was wild. I had no idea what to expect. It's like, oh, small groups of students doing performances, but the audience was just going wild because I realized it's like, oh, okay, the Micronesians in the community are coming to support these students and those relationships are so strong. But the challenge again is going to be taking it beyond that event and making that a little bit more of an interchange. The other place where we welcome people in, well, there's a couple of them. Athletics is always one. I see a lot of families showing up for games. Remember my very first volleyball game, and um, there's this woman sitting in front of me who was actually cheering for Chaminade and not UH Hilo. And I'm thinking, wonder what's going on with that. And then because it was my first game, they introduced my husband and I, and then she turned around, she's like, oh, you're our new chancellor. And we started chatting. It turns out that, her best friend's daughter was on the Chaminade team. So she, had to come out and cheer her on, but she was a diehard Hilo supporter at the same time. But then we got to know each other and connect over that. And she got to teach me a little bit more about competitive volleyball, because I haven't really followed volleyball since I was, in high school, right? So it's those little connections, but I think if it's not just me, if it's everybody on this campus making connections with somebody outside their own family, then all of a sudden people feel more comfortable coming in, right? The other place that is kind of a front porch for us is Imiloa. They're doing a camp right now for keiki because so many people are doing learning at home. So we do have some kids here on campus and doing culturally based scientific education with all of the safety protocols in place. They've done a great job up there. But those are really good shining examples of what many things on this campus could look like. So I think the project moving forward is to take these great examples, these pockets of excellence we see across the campus, and have other groups learn from them, so that we then become a welcoming place, not just for students and prospective students, but also just community members generally.
Awesome. Yeah, that feel of opening up your front porch, that's a very Hawaiian mentality. And just like I was saying, one day you feel like a visitor or a malihini, someone who is not belonging to that house. The next day, we're gonna make you feel like family. We're gonna have our doors wide open for you. So come by, check out what we have to offer, the resources and programs we have to offer. But of course, follow the current guidelines of the pandemic. Campus is closed.
And so, one of the ways we do that is also by reaching out into community. But I think, sometimes we're out in the community and people don't necessarily know it's a UH Hilo project. Some are pretty obvious. Kahakaula just got a grant to work on an early literacy project, for example, so studying literacy in Hawaiian families around Hawaiian language. And so that's a way of taking something inside the university and going out, right? Or the work that so many of our science programs are doing by, we have several faculty doing things related to forest restoration. So they're doing research out in the environment with students, again, more so before pandemic, but trying to do a little bit now. And then that comes back around and benefits the community in other ways. And, some of that people see really directly, and some of it they don't until you start to see something change. And it's like, oh, this is great work. And you get curious of who was involved, and you find out, oh, the University of Hawaii Hilo had a role in that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, even now more so in these days of the pandemic, I think now more than ever, our community members are looking at UH Hilo as that resource to help them figure out kind of what's going on during the pandemic and how we can make our lives a little bit easier living on our island. You have mentioned some of the programs and some of the activities that campus is putting on for our community, but are there any other kinds of resources that UH Hilo is providing to our community you think are essential now and in the future?
Yeah, I think, UH Hilo is part, as is Hawaii Community College, of the Vibrant Hawaii initiative. And so, we contribute ideas, knowledge, but we also provide venues. So Vibrant Hawaii has resources to distribute food in the community. And some of that food is coming to our students. And again, that looks like, oh, okay, the community is supporting the university again, but our students aren't all living here in a residence hall, right? They're living in this community and they have the same kinds of food insecurities as other people do. So providing space on the campus for our students to come in and receive the food, is a big piece. And we only get to do that because we're partnering with Vibrant Hawaii the way we are. I think another thing that we've been engaged in, of course, is testing for COVID. And during this current era, that's so important that those people who have been exposed or who feel that they're at risk have opportunities for testing. And so we made arrangements with Premier Medical to come and do some testing on campus. The relationship started with our athletes, because now that our athletes are doing practice, they need to be tested more often. But then when it's scheduled, we try to have testing for campus community, but then open it up for the rest of the community. And not only having it here on the campus, we typically do it up by athletics so that we don't have a lot of foot traffic in Central Campus, again, trying to keep people as safe as possible. But also our pharmacy students and our nursing students help with the testing. That way, again, they get experience, but then they are also providing a service to the community. And I'm seeing that in different ways. I mentioned performing arts earlier, and they usually by this time of year, we've done a couple of performances. We've invited people in to see shows. And of course, they can't do that now. So next week, and you can find this on the UH Hilo website, some of the students and faculty have done Halloween videos that they're going to stream. So they're called Scary Scenarios, and there'll be little vignettes that are entertaining, because we know, kids in the community probably aren't going to be trick-or-treating this year. I mean, everything's going to change, right? So what can we do? Really looking at what can we do given this circumstance. And so community needs testing support. We try to help with that. Children need engagement programs, entertainment. So what can we do for that? And I mentioned Center for Community Engagement a little earlier. And even though we've had to push a pause on some of the projects, they were able to do some virtual hands-on STEM activities, which again, engaging with middle school students, working with them on projects. Our department, our education program has come up with a way to still get student teachers engaged with education, connected to classrooms, even insofar as some of those classes are online. So I'm hoping that this creativity that we've applied to the COVID era and doing the things online can expand into other activities when we start to come out. The meeting I was in this morning with people from across the country, the realization hits that we're not going to go back. When we go back to normal, it's not going to be the same. That we have learned things and we have changed things in a way that whatever that new normal is going to be different. But what I'm trying to figure out, when I'm challenging the campus to figure out, is how do we take our values and the expertise that we have and our goodwill, because we also live in this community, to work together for the betterment of everybody. And again, it's not going to look the same, but we have so many creative, caring people. I know one of the groups that was invited to this webinar was our alumni. And I was looking and realizing how many of our alumni work here on campus, right? Which tells me something. It tells me that they had a good experience here, I'm hoping. And that's one of the reasons they decided to stick around. And that I also hope that means that we are being also a responsible employer in this community and trying to provide good support for our employees. I'm a chancellor, so I'm going to start talking in all kinds of directions. So I probably didn't answer the question, but it's.
That was a great answer. Mahalo nui. I am curious, what do you see, or what do you envision the new normal to look like? I know that it's kind of hard to think about, being that we've adjusted to current days being the new norm, but once all of this passes, and you mentioned going back to a normal functioning campus again, what do you think, or what do you see will be the difference going back to that?
Well, I think, you know, we've learned that we don't, as much as we like to be in a room together, we don't have to do everything that way. So here on campus, for example, all last year, every month I did Chancellor's Brown Bag, right? So, you know, people could bring their lunch and we would sit in a room and I'd answer any question from anybody. And typically we had maybe about 20 people show up. We've put them on Zoom since April, and we routinely have over 100 people show up. And I think that's for two reasons. One, because people are curious. It's like, what's going on? There's so many things that we have to deal with. But also it's, I can sit at my desk and still tune in, right? I can still learn something and get some work done at the same time. So people are kind of multitasking or finding different ways to connect. Or maybe it's a day where it's a faculty member who doesn't teach that day, so is usually not on campus, but they can, you know, take the hour and just pull it up online. So some of that stuff, I think about the fact that a number of us used to fly back and forth to Honolulu. I used to go almost every week. I don't have to do that. I have to go sometimes, but I don't have to go every week. And I think I've learned that there's ways, which also saves the university money, of course. So there's that is going to change. I also had to laugh because when they pushed out all the information about staying safe in COVID, you know, wash your hands. We have some posters in our little break room here in the administration building that have been up for so long that the paper's kind of yellow. And on those little posters about flu prevention, it says, wash your hands, preferably 20 seconds with soap. And it's like, okay, that's been there for years. And maybe we just need to make that a habit from now on, right? So that little things like that. But I just had to laugh. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. It's been in front of me this whole time. So I think, you know, what can we do? And, you know, again, I was talking about the online. Is there a better way to connect with some of the students who can't make it to campus? Or, you know, we have so many students who are parents, and for them putting together a schedule and to be on campus X number of hours a day, well, can we do some hybrid sort of thing where, okay, well, maybe on Tuesday you come to campus, but on Thursday you can be online. I noticed one of our faculty who was featured in social media this week was saying that. It's like, you know, even after the pandemic, I'm going to allow my students to attend class online if they want. I'm going to figure out a way as a faculty member to do that. And I think that's going to help a lot. So, you know, and the other piece of the new normal, at least for the short term, is our budget. Hawaii is, I think everybody on the webinar knows, has lost a tremendous amount of state income over the last few months. And so we're all having to get creative with our expenses and how we can do more with less again. We're used to that on this island. We've faced any number of natural disasters, you know, hurricanes, lava, and here's another one. And how do we cope? And the other thing that I think is so important now that I hope transcends, which we had before, but I think it to me is a little clearer now, is looking out for one another, both here on campus and in the community. You know, checking in. It's like, oh, you know, I haven't heard from you for a while. You know, whether that's with one of our students or just with a friend, checking in to make sure we're okay. What can I do to help? And that's, I'm hoping that piece is going to be with us in the new normal too.
Well, yeah, totally. There has been a lot of different transitions, a lot of quick learning to do, especially on the technology level. You know, you mentioned how that one faculty member was still going to offer his courses online. I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a tech savvy person, but after this whole pandemic experience, you know, like I feel like I can add technology skills to my belt now because of that. You know, and it kind of forces us to adapt. to be able to thrive in the environment we're in or the current state that we're in, which is a blessing in a way, you know, because if we haven't gone through this, we wouldn't be prepared for the next time something like this would happen.
Yeah, you know,
But yeah,
there's that old cliche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
yeah,
And I always think about that. I think about, well, what can I learn from this? You know,
mhm,
how can I be better at what I do? And I've been so impressed by um, all kinds of people in the community and campus just getting creative on ways to do it. You know, we found a way to do things like reopen the farmers market and be pretty safe about it. We've figured out ways here on campus to do some things online and not just classes, right? You think about how we did orientation this year. We had some online stuff and some face-to-face stuff. We have some students living here on campus, a lot of students not. So, and just, you know, again, what did we learn that can make us better and stronger on the other side?
definitely, definitely. Well, we are nearing the end of our webinar today. We're coming up to about 20 minutes left. I wanted to ask, was there anything else you wanted to include or share as far as um, visions for a post-pandemic UH Hilo or UH Hilo breaking down barriers or even our campus being an essential advocate to our community before we get to address any of the registration questions?
Yeah, I think, you know, I talked a little bit about research, and I think it's really one of the important hands-on experiences we give to students. So when I talk about hands-on, or in higher ed, we use the phrase high impact practices, right? What are the things that really help students learn? And what we have found, particularly with first generation students, is what's really important is not just hands-on, but work that is meaningful. And so some of the things going on campus that I'm really excited about are in your own unit, Kipuka, and how we do culturally sustainable ways of teaching. I think it's so important to integrate the cultural relevance of what we do. And so I know one of our history professors, you know, Dr. Inglis, now she does her research actually at Kalapapa on Molokai. But she found a way, even with the pandemic, to get a group of students there before the inter-island quarantine was with us. And that experience, and then had another professor here on campus working with the Korean community, and even doing something like visiting grave sites and cleaning them. You know, you've got a culturally relevant, very emotionally powerful experience for these students, and doing a service of cleaning a gravesite for someone who may not have family anymore. Their descendants aren't here, they've moved away or whatever. And it's a way of deeply honoring this community and the people who once lived here, as also a way of honoring, I think, the current residents, that we care. And at the same time, students are learning about history, they're learning about culture. So it also benefits them as university students. And then I think about, you know, some of the other environmental projects that are going on. And I talked about the forest restoration, but then I think about the work we're doing in data science. You know, almost everything now is dependent on big data, whether it's healthcare or, you know, when we were tracking the lava flow, our faculty were out there with drones and tracking the lava flow in 2018, but also what we've been doing around coral health. So they can collect the data and then put it into these models so that students can learn without putting a whole lot of human bodies out there on the reef, which, you know, starts to degrade after a while. So we can bring it in, use the technology tools to do that. And then, you know, I mentioned that we do volunteerism as well. So it's not just service learning, we have flat out volunteerism. Several student groups do that work. one of the ones that's been quite active of late is athletics, our student athletes, because most of our student athletes are actually back here on island because they're starting practice. We're hoping we might have some games in the spring. We still don't know. Those decisions are yet to be made. But you can imagine these people who are usually out and about and really physically active and not having those competitions, right? So what can they do? So we've had athletes working with a local grower. They harvested 15,000 ears of corn and then made sure those got to the food pantries, food basket. We've had them preparing meals at Hawaii Island Home for Recovery, again, wearing the mask, right? And keeping their distance and using safe practices, but seeing a need in the community and really wanting to serve. And as more connections are made with the community, I think we'll have better ideas of how we can serve even more. I also say, as a cautionary note, though, we can't be everything to everybody. That's always a challenge, but we can really apply the expertise and the people power we have to as many things as possible. And one of the things that we've done the last couple of years, if people go to our website and type in Speakers Bureau, they'll find a whole list of faculty and staff expertise and people who are available to give talks. My own subjects are a little obscure. One of the talks I have given at previous universities is one of the areas I study is the Middle East. And so I talk about women unveiling and well, you know, sometimes it's easy to see a woman with a veil and think she's being oppressed. And in some countries, it's actually a sign of empowerment, right? So it's kind of talking about that. But we have people who will give talks or workshops on leadership, on any number of topics related to, you know, what we've researched here on campus. And I know Rotary takes advantage of that, local schools, you know, bringing in an expert to talk. You don't always have to bring in an expert from the mainland or even from Honolulu. We have a lot of people here with a lot of knowledge to share. And that's kind of a comfort zone for a lot of faculty, right? Because here's what I'm passionate about, and they'd love to talk to people about what they do. And so I think we have lots of opportunities to continue to open those doors, but I keep coming back to this idea of how we make the experiences meaningful for our students and how we co-create these experiences with the community. So helping to identify areas where we can connect more closely with the community. And then we can kind of shape our educational experiences around those needs and around preparing the workforce to support what the Big Island needs. You know, my slogan, kind of not just for this event, but for just the way I'm looking at things is I'm interested in UH Hilo being the university the island needs, but I'm also really interested in us being the university this island deserves. And I need people to help me define what that means.
Oh, that's awesome, Chancellor. You know, I really pull to what you say about working or doing things with the community, not to the community or for the community. And I think that's a really good step towards your slogan of creating a university our island people, our island community deserves, is working with the communities that surround our forest here, our UH Hilo campus. Like, hi. So we are, oh, I'm sorry, what was
No, I
that?
was gonna say, we just have to, you know, poke a couple holes in that snow globe somehow, right?
Yeah,
Or invite people
definitely.
under it, yeah?
Yeah. So we are coming to our last 10 minutes of our session today, and I did want to ask you or address to you some of the questions from our audience, if that's okay, if we can spend some time on that. Our first question, what are some planned efforts for outreach to traditionally underserved and underinvolved communities of UH Hilo?
And I think the original question was talking particularly about the Filipino community here on the island. And so I did reach out to one of our faculty because, as fate would have it, I just heard about something that he's working on. And Professor Jubilado, who's in the humanities. He's working with our Filipino student leaders on a couple of projects. They're doing a cultural dance workshop, and they're doing that kind of in partnership with the community, kind of, so being able to connect and teach about dance. And then also he tells me, and I did not know this, that Filipinos apparently celebrate Christmas from about September 1st all the way through February. So they're also going to be doing a workshop on Filipino Christmas lanterns, right? And so he gets to work with the Filipino student leaders on campus, some leaders in the Filipino community on island, but then offering this education to other students as well. You don't have to be Filipino to learn how to make a Filipino Christmas lantern. That's just a little example. We've been talking about, as I said, international nights and how we can get beyond just that big 2-day celebration and all the prep, particularly since we're not going to probably be able to do a big live performance this year. So I'm asking people across the campus to use this year to really be thinking about these things. Like, okay, when we come out of pandemic, how do we do it better? So I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the communities that would like to connect with us. And so I will continue to educate myself too about where we can connect a little bit more strongly. So it's with so many things, work in progress, and trying to convert some ideas and goodwill into action here over the next few months.
Awesome, mahalo. Our next question, speaking of expanding, our next question is, what expansion, if any, are you planning for mental health and wellness support during and post-pandemic?
So mental health support is something, nationally, the data are showing fewer students calling campus counseling centers right now. And so but we don't want to misconstrue that data. We don't want to say, oh, people are not feeling so bad. It's more likely that people, because they're so isolated, are not reaching out. And so this is an area in which we are bringing in some tech tools also, so that we can do a better job connecting in the virtual environment, as well as continuing to provide face-to-face services here on campus. We have been adamant that we are going to keep campus offices physically open as long as it's relatively safe to do so. Because we do know we have students here locally, whether they're living in a residence hall or they live in Keao or Pahoa or Honoka'a, who are able to come to campus and would rather access services in person. So we're working on making sure we're there. We've asked faculty to check in on their students. So if you see that, you've got students on their roster, but maybe in this online environment, you haven't seen them logging on. Or if it's a student who never turns their camera on. Now, students sometimes don't turn their camera on for lots of reasons, right? It could be they don't really want to show where they're having to sit and do their work. I read a story about an adult learner, not here, but on a campus, who was trying to take a class and had lots of kids at home and was kind of embarrassed about where she lives. So she would close herself up in a closet with her laptop. She's not going to turn her camera on. But what I want to see is a professor reach out with her and make sure she's okay. It's okay if your camera's not on, but I want to make sure you're understanding the material. And we're not all trained as mental health counselors, but we all can pay attention. And so the work that we do around diversity and equity and health, the see something, say something kind of culture where we're just paying attention. And in this time, I think we're trying to do that even more so that we can be well in tune with students who do need extra help and get that to them as soon as possible. We've also been working on students and employees with ADA needs. and how we best communicate with them in this technologically moderated environment, which is better for some and not as good for others. And trying to make sure that we meet students' basic needs as well. That gets back to the food pantry, the support that we can offer. And, you know, we can't replace all social service agencies just with campus resources, but we can connect people with services, and we can support our students as best we can. You know, Mala, we're getting pretty close to the end, and I wanted to kind of ask you to talk a little bit about your experience at UH Hilo. I mean, you're one of those people who was a student and graduated and then came back to work here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I am from Maui and Molokai, and I'm a first generation in my family to achieve a bachelor's degree. I chose to come to UH Hilo and study in our Hawaiian Studies department, hopefully to strengthen my own, I guess, identity as who I am as a native Hawaiian in our own place, in our own environment, and what I can do to contribute to that, whether it's through cultural practice, whether it's through lifestyle, whether it's through academia. And surprisingly, when I graduated in 2016, you know, Auntie Gil and Tangaro had a position that encompassed all of that, that encompassed utilizing culture, utilizing language to strengthen student academics, and provide a different platform of student success, and that was through cultural and community engagement. And I just remember being a student, you know, not really having the experiences of my parents showing me the ropes. This is what's going to happen in college. This is what you're going to expect in college. Not necessarily having that, but having different, I guess, networks on campus or programs such as Kipuka, such as our different Pacific Island offices and support services. Just made me feel comfortable, made me feel at home, and made me feel like this is achievable, no matter who you come from, no matter where you come from, you know, and really position me to think or break down my barrier, and push through and achieve that degree. And I wanted to provide that same kind of experience for fellow Native Hawaiian students, as well as any student that comes through our campus and through our offices. We don't know what their stories are when they submit the application, but once we get to work with them and you know, get to find out why, the reason why are you here, why are you getting your degree, we'll find relation in that way, and can develop a relationship and see their success. And that's my goal, you know, in my role, that's what I want to do. I want to see the success of our students as those before me had seen my success.
Yeah, we all, you know, stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us. And I love that attitude you have about, you know, paying forward on the support you got and trying to help with others. Because in the end, and we have all these different community connections, but at root, the main thing that we do for this community in this state is educate students who we hope will be responsible citizens that want to give back to the world. And that's our main mission, is to lift up the community by having more well-educated adults with really strong community values, which I think you certainly show, and so many of our other alums in the community. So thank you for that.
Mahalo.
Yeah, we're getting down to the last couple of minutes. So, you know, one of my things I'm supposed to do is thank everybody. And of course I would do that anyway, but I'm just so appreciative that people have taken an hour to spend with us. Some of you will be receiving in the coming days an email appeal in your inbox, or maybe a phone call from a student caller. And while this webinar is not meant to be a fundraising pitch, I thought I would say that, you know, a couple of the funds I always direct people's attention to are the University of Hawaii at Hilo Enrichment Fund. That is the fund that allows us to direct support to where the greatest needs are on campus. And then another one is the UH Hilo Student Crisis Fund. And particularly in this day and age, we've gotten CARES money for students who have been impacted by CARES, or by COVID, whether it has been because they're ill or their family members lost a job or something like that. But we also have students all the time who encounter emergencies, like car breaks down, they can't get to campus, can't get to class, and just need a little bit of support to get them over that obstacle. And that's what the Student Crisis Fund is for. And both of those funds can help students across the board, which I think is really important. So, if this webinar has inspired people to give back, those are a couple of things. But really, in the end, the most important thing is being willing to work together to improve the community. And so I'm here. People know where to find me with ideas, and I'm always here to listen.
Oh yeah, right on. Mahalo nui, Chancellor, for all that you have shared with us today, with the alumni and with our community. I did want to take some time to let everyone know, once the webinar concludes today, a survey link will pop up, and we'd like to encourage you to take the time to fill out that short survey. It'll give us any feedback on your experience today and really help our UH alumni team to better understand how we can continue to serve our UH alumni community. Again, mahalo nui, Chancellor Bonnie Erin, for preparing for today and sharing with us how UH Hilo plans to move forward into the future, breaking barriers, strengthening our community ties. Was a good talk story session. And yes, we hope that all of you who tuned in today are doing well in Waika'i, and staying safe within your own communities and within your own homes. With that being said, we wish you aloha, and we will conclude today's webinar.
Aloha.